We have a Rise News correspondent, Aneze Osakwe, joining us live from Davos. Thank you very much, Aneze. Good to see you. Now, you just spoke with the CEO of OANDO there, who's, of course, in Davos. What were the highlights of his fireside chat and your subsequent conversation with him?
Yes, it's good to be with you this evening. Good evening, Adesua. And yeah, like we heard from, those were just excerpts from the larger conversation that I had with Wale Tinubu, the CEO of OANDO. And we spoke immediately after he gave a fireside chat at the Nigeria House in Davos this morning. And I think that he pretty much reiterated what we've been hearing from all of the different members of Nigeria's delegation here in Switzerland. And that's the fact that we've heard it from the VP. Nigeria is open for business. Nigeria is ready for investments. Nigeria has a robust economy. And all of these points that these different members of Nigeria's the administration, as well as business leaders have been making, have been buttressed by the fact that they're all here in person making this pitch, basically the ultimate pitch of Nigeria's economy to the international community. But I was particularly, I guess, intrigued by my conversation with Mr. Tinubu because I was really curious about this idea of balancing what's going on in Nigeria on the ground with essentially inviting the global community to come and invest. I mean, we know that Nigeria has moved up the ranks recently in terms of ease of doing business, but it's not the easiest place to do business. In your opening introduction there, when I was listening, you know, you talked about this latest kidnapping, and we talk about terrorism, banditry, violence in Nigeria. And while this isn't Nigeria's story, Nigeria has incredible successes as well. This is still the reality of families and countless people across the country. So it was interesting to me to ask him about how, as a business leader, he plans to essentially strike that balance between the reality and, you know, inviting the international community. And, you know, to him, it didn't seem like that big of a deal. He essentially said that less than 2% of Nigeria's landmass is affected by instability. And while that sounds like such a small number, it affects a significant number of people. So I think I'll just be watching to see what comes next after the economic agreements have been signed, after the deals have been done. What does this do for the larger situation in Nigeria on the ground for the people? And I think that's what really stood out to me. And very quickly, I really enjoyed talking to him about electric vehicles as well. And his timeline, basically, you know, I told him, I said, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but when do you envision electric vehicles sort of taking over in Nigeria? And he said 20 years, which really isn't that far off. So, you know, in 20 years, we can have this conversation again and see if that's actually the case. But I think that points to this idea that there is an interest in electric vehicles in Nigeria. And if the country is able to adopt it, it would lead to significant changes on all fronts, from climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, air quality, health. So it has a lot of implications. So we'll definitely see where that thread goes.
Indeed, Anieze. I mean, when you say balancing act of security and business in Nigeria was what intrigued you, I mean, for me, it was the electric vehicle conversation and his timeline of 2 decades. Then you gave the numbers and the figures of what China was able to do
11 million
in
a year.
And my question would be, I mean, are we even having enough conversation to ensure that that optimistic timeline of Mr. Tinubu comes to reality? For countries like Nigeria at Davos, what's the conversation like when it comes to EVs and, you know, the scope of it all?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, and I'm not sure if Mr. Tinubu was able to either attend or watch, but there was a panel conversation earlier this morning with the governor of Michigan State from the U.S., Gretchen Whitmer is her name, as well as the executive director of BYD, which is that big e-vehicle company in Nigeria. I think they have a showroom in Lagos as well, with a few other panelists, and they were essentially talking about the contrast and comparing the electric vehicle space between the US and China and what China has done to essentially make it I think China has 52% of all of their cars are e-vehicles, which is really impressive given how sizable their population is. And what Stella Lee said was essentially the fact that it was something that the government really pushed for. And I think that that's critical here in terms of thinking about how other countries can adopt it. She said that the government essentially made a decision that this is what was going to be. You know, they put their line in the sand and said that we want to ensure that most of the cars on our roads are going to be electrical vehicles, and that's what they did. And essentially, because the government put certain orders in place, consumers started seeing these cars as more popular, as more, agreeable to drive, and now they're on the roads more than regular cars. So I think that a really interesting takeaway from what Stella Lee was saying was that there needs to be that will, there needs to be that desire from the government to first put these things in place to enable companies to actually create and manufacture these cars. And then eventually that popularity aspect will catch on, where consumers actually would prefer to buy an e-vehicle as opposed to a regular car that we're used to. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes in Nigeria. I know that I've been in one e-vehicle in Nigeria before, and it was such an interesting experience because it's so different from what we're used to. We're used to seeing cars go by with a lot of smoke and just making a lot of noise, but the e-vehicle was very quiet. So it would be a completely different reality to envision in Nigeria, where the majority of cars are EVs. We'll see.
Yes. Well, let's hope Nigeria truly is ready for, to take over the world, considering that we do have, gas and everything it takes to drive the electric vehicle. Thank you very much, Nieze Osakwe, for us there at Davos, joining us on News Night.